and welcome to this episode of Killer Creation. In this series, I create a killer and a survivor for the asymmetrical horror survival game, Dead by Daylight. First, let me thank everyone who has subscribed to the channel and those who have followed me on the Dead by Daylight, horror, and furry aminos. Your support and comments help more than you know. Now let's take this time to look into the abyss and see what stares back at us with the aid of the priest. The priest's origins are surrounded in mystery. What is known is that he was once a noble in the mythical city of Atlantis. It is believed that he oversaw trade with lesser kingdoms on the continent, and that during his time discovered texts and books that were ancient even during the time of Atlantis, and that these texts spoke of beings far beyond the imagination that the mortal mind could comprehend. The priest is said to have been so intrigued by this knowledge that he began to hunt down any other sources that he could to learn more. When he found that he could contact these beings, he wasted no time. Whether it was during his first summoning or his 100th, what is known is that he eventually gained favor with the higher powers he was communing with and that they warped his form to more closely resemble them. While the priest was delving further and further into serving these ancient powers, the entity was gaining knowledge of the priest. Such a devoted and willing servant was rare indeed, and the entity desired such a creature to serve its means. It took some time for the entity to either silence the other beings speaking with the priest or override their voices so that only its voice could be heard. When the priest found that only a single powerful being was now speaking to it, he listened carefully and dutifully. Once he heard the entity's promise of more knowledge and more power in exchange for sacrifices, he willingly entered the entity's realm. Now that we know how the priest came into the realm of the entity, let's check out his base stats, then find out his power. The priest has a 4.6 base speed and a 24-meter terror radius. He is a medium-sized killer, and his decent speed and smaller terror radius means he'll be able to get close to survivors without much warning, also that he can begin to infect them with his voice of the old ones. You start the game with 10 tokens. You can use the active ability button to write down the language of the old ones on a wall or floor. Survivors who can see these scripts gain insanity. It takes 2 seconds to place the script down. Whenever all tokens are spent, anytime you use this ability again, the oldest placed language disappears. While in a chase with a survivor, you pray in the language of the old ones to cause the survivors to gain insanity. Insanity can build up to 3 levels. Each level has the following effects. Insanity level 1, survivors see the language of the old ones from a further distance as the script grows brighter for them. Survivors in Insanity level 1 begin to mutter in the language of the old ones sporadically. Other survivors within 5 meters of a survivor in Insanity level 1 begin to gain insanity. Insanity level 2, other survivors who appear in the view of a survivor with Insanity level 2 will look like the priest until they come within 10 meters of the survivor. Survivors in Insanity level 2 constantly mutter in the language of the old ones and spread insanity to other survivors faster and up to a distance of 10 meters. Insanity level 3. The aura of other survivors appears as the aura of the priest, and they carry a terror radius of 10 meters until they come within 5 meters of the survivor with Insanity level 3. Survivors in Insanity level 3 will also see the tendrils of the old ones sprouting from the ground in random locations, which will slow them down by 25% if they pass within 5 meters of the tendrils. Whenever a survivor reaches a new level of insanity from another survivor spreading it to them, the aura of that survivor is revealed to the priest for 5 seconds. And that takes care of the priest's powers. I think you'll find that the priest is a killer who specializes in deception and splitting the survivors up. Using his tokens, he can place Old One's script in key locations as the game progresses, and place it tactically around generators so that survivors are forced to look away from places you might approach from in order to avoid looking at the script and gaining insanity, or in common pathways to force them to look at it as they run away. His ability to infect survivors with insanity while in a chase is important, as it is the primary way which he starts his snowball effect. Once a survivor is insane, they'll never recover, but they will spread it and become a burden to the rest of the team. Eventually, survivors will have to wonder if it's you coming for them, or just a teammate arriving to assist. Some locational ability is built into the spreading of insanity, but Insanity level 3 is where the priest's late game power comes in, allowing the presence of the tendrils to slow down survivors, or cause them to take wider paths than they normally would like to. All in all, I think this playstyle of passively splitting the survivors and spreading insanity make the priest a unique killer and likely to be underestimated at first. But now that we understand the priest's power, let's take a look at the perks the entity has blessed him with in order to aid in his servitude. The priest's first perk is called Elder Sign. You have dedicated yourself to the powers of old ones such as the entity and have inscribed their signs on the conduits of their power. Totems take 20, 40, or 60% longer to cleanse. Whenever survivors are within 10 meters of a totem and looks at it, they scream, revealing their location. The priest's second perk is called Intervention. The entity has acknowledged your devotion and rewards you by punishing the survivors for their defiant acts. Whenever survivor is unhooked, all generators not currently being repaired by survivors are blocked by the entity for the next 16 seconds. Affected generators are highlighted by a white aura. Intervention can only be triggered once every 100, 80, or 60 seconds. The priest's third perk is called Bewildering Presence. Your devotion to ancient powers has left their influence on you, and it affects all those around you. Skill checks survivors receive while in your terror radius go in the opposite direction. Whenever a survivor enters your terror radius, they receive a tremendously difficult skill check if they are currently performing an action that can trigger one. This effect can only occur once, every 60, 45, or 30 seconds. And that will do it for the priest's perks. The priest brings a very diverse and interesting lot to the game. Elder Sign gives you knowledge of the survivors when they near a totem, and gives you time to react to that information by making it take longer to cleanse totems. Very helpful when they spawn in on your hexes. Intervention is a different take on Thrilling Tremors. Instead of survivors getting off of a gen just before you hook someone, they have to time when they think one of their friends will unhook someone. Or, you could combine it with Thrilling Tremors to get both effects and lock down generators more often. Finally, Bewildering Presence not only forces survivors to make skill checks just for coming into your terror radius, but that skill check, and any others they received while staying in your terror radius, will go backwards. This simple effect will cause a great deal of confusion and frustration, especially with killers like the Doctor, or perks like Huntress's Lullaby. But, now that we've finished with the priest's perks, let's meet this episode's survivor, Derek McGavin. Derek was a private detective in the roaring 1920s. His career was stagnant, his booze prolific, and his wallet almost always empty. That wasn't to say he didn't get business. He did. It was the 20s after all, and all the energy and raucous of the time meant that the people regularly went out to have a good time, and they regularly didn't come back when they were supposed to, if at all. He was simply growing bored of the cases he was getting. A cheating spouse, a two-timing business partner, dirt-digging politicians. Derek had seen it all 100 times over. He was tired of it all and just wanted something different. His prayers were answered after a fashion when a letter was dropped off at his office promising him a substantial reward if he could discover the whereabouts of a missing woman who was last seen leaving a bridal shop only weeks before. He thought it was just another runaway fiancé, but his investigation soon proved him wrong and led him into a world of occultism and madness. The investigation was a blur of events that played like a badly edited flicker show, and Derek began to question his sanity. As he neared the brink of madness, he awoke, blinking away the intrusive light and heat of a campfire only feet away, and someone asking him if he were remembering his investigation again. How did they know? When did he get here? How often had this happened? How long had he actually been in this place? Now that we know how Derek wound up in the realm of the entity, let's take a look at his perks and see what he's bringing with him. Derek's first perk is called Gleaning Information. Getting information by alternative means is your specialty. You know all kinds of ways to stay informed. Whenever another survivor stuns or blinds the killer, you see the killer's aura for 2, 3, or 4 seconds. Derek's second perk is called Lockdown. Keeping information is safe, but keeping valuables safe is more so. You start the game with 1, 2, or 3 tokens. Whenever another survivor jumps into a locker, you lose a token. Survivors who cause you to lose a token this way cannot have their locker opened by the killer for 10 seconds. Derek's third perk is called Delayed Reaction. Sometimes it's best to get away before everything around you goes crazy. You know how to prolong a situation while you slip away unnoticed. Whenever you cleanse a totem, fail a skill check, or would reveal your location by a quick action, the killer receives the notification 3 seconds after the action has taken place. This effect can only occur once every 30, 25, or 20 seconds. And there are Derek's perks. I think the mix he brings can be used by many different playstyles, even if they end up being just a bit niche. Gleaning information can really help survivors know where the killer is when they're stunned or blinded, meaning they don't have to wonder if the person running the killer is having problems or not. Combine it with Alert, and you'll get a fair amount of killer location knowledge all trial long. Lockdown is unique in that only other survivors can use the tokens you have, and killers will only know that someone has those tokens when they try to pull someone from the locker. The upside is that it can waste a good amount of the killer's time, while the downside is that the perk only checks for when a survivor goes into a locker, not if the killer is nearby the survivor when they enter one. So you'll want to let people know about it before the trial starts so they consider their locker use carefully. Delayed reaction is a great perk to let people who can run the killer confuse them at jungle gyms and TL walls by making the vault notifications come well after you use that vault or pallet. But it's useful for everyone since it covers failed skill checks and totem cleanses as well. Killer running players could combine it with quick and quiet to get a silent vault first, since silent vaults don't give a notification, and then a delayed vault later to continually confuse and confound the killer. But that will have to do it for Derrick's perks and this episode of Killer Creation. I hope you all found the priest to be a unique and interesting killer that you would like to try out, and that you found Derrick and his perks to be worthy of snatching up for your use. Thank you all for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel for future content. If you didn't, give it a dislike and let me know why in the comments. I hope you all have a great day, and as always, stay positive.